Thank you so much. Good evening all. Thanks for having me. My name is Rainer. I work with Frog in Shanghai. We don't have a presence in Australia, as you know, but we've been here on the ground for a couple of months now, and I thought more than anything else, was hoping that this presentation is a good excuse to say hello. In Asia, Frog has about 60 people. We've been in Shanghai since 2007 now. And yeah, what I thought was interesting is maybe talk a little bit about how, on the back of wearables, the difference between the work in China and in Australia is how that maps out. Obviously, Frog's one of the older companies in the industry, and we take a lot of pride in having had a hand in the different personal computing paradigms. And what I want to talk about tonight is whether wearable technology is the new, or is one of the new wearable computing paradigms. There was, of course, to start with, the first wave, fixed and isolated, very lonely, in your study, desktop computing, hacking spreadsheets and working on word processors. Not very connected, but nevertheless a very important milestone. Now, the second wave, we saw the mobile devices coming our way that put more processing power, more connectivity, more memory into our back pockets than we were able to imagine up until then. Now, what many people argue is whether wearable computing or wearable devices actually really represent this this third wave of personal computing. And what I find interesting is that as interaction designers or creators and innovators as a whole, I think we have a role to play to define what our relationship with technology that we actually wear on our bodies should be. This is actually a quite old concept that one of our designers in Munich has put together about 8 years ago or so, I think. He's a passionate cyclist, and he wanted a mask to keep his breathing or his air clean. And yeah, controversial, I would say, but not as controversial as probably these guys have looked. This is one of my favorite images, 1995. These are wearable and computing enthusiasts at the MIT. Total geeks. Some of them look really freaky and scary. But this just goes to show that the idea of wearable computing is old. I myself worked in a EU-funded project around that time around head-mounted displays. So one thing that we hear a lot when we speak to clients who want to take to market the next wearable device is, let's just build it. They often didn't think about their idea so well. The people will come, and what's weird today, I think, or they think will be tomorrow's ordinary. This is, of course, a statement that we love to challenge. But the question is really, what is tomorrow's ordinary, or whether wearable computing has fully exploited or leveraged its potential yet. I personally am pretty disappointed so far. When I think about wearable computing, it's always this Radiohead song that comes to mind, Fitter, Happier, Healthier. I think most of the wearable devices that we are wearing on our bodies up until now, they tell us that we haven't walked enough, or we haven't read our emails yet, or we haven't we didn't stick to our diet. It actually capitalizes on guilt, and it actually uses bad emotions to I don't know, encourage behaviors that we struggle to keep up very often. And I think that's not really worthy of what wants to be the next wave of personal computing. If we look at PCs or mobiles, there's something that we can learn from them. They really gave us superpowers. They really changed the way that we could do things. Wearable computing is actually not very, very close to that. I think it really falls far behind that expectation. So one thing that I wanted to suggest is that it needs to become more open, and it needs to encourage a lot more like shared innovation and encourage tinkering really with our bodies, with sensors, with everything, so we can negotiate what we want this technology to do. This is a good example here to illustrate what I'm talking about. In the 80s, the US government has opened up access to the GPS system. And back then they had no idea what people would do with it. Now we have navigation systems. Now we have location-based services. We have beautiful weather apps that interaction designers love to design. None of that I think people had in mind when the technology was actually open. And I think it's that momentum that wearable technology is still missing. And it's really difficult to do because these devices are small, they're difficult to build. To create openness and to create a platform that people can improvise with isn't easy to do mechanically. One guy that I find really inspiring in this context is Neil Harbison. He was born without the ability to see colors, so he had this camera attached to his skull that turns the color spectrum of his viewable area into an audible signal, and that actually allowed him to do something that he wasn't capable of before. Have you guys seen this guy? This is Tim Cannon, who has the first body API. This creeps most people out, I guess. And certainly he didn't get approval from any hospital to get this done. So this was actually done in the basement somewhere in Essen in Germany. And he had this like really clunky pack of sensors, connectivity elements, and batteries sewn into his underarm. And it was positioned in a way so that every time a mobile device interrogates that API, it would light up his tattoo. So there is a lot of thought has gone into that. But it's funny how when we actually prototype with our own bodies and do something that we weren't capable of before, we don't applaud this. This is something that that's creepy, right? And I think this is not what I'm advocating for. But there is an autonomy. There is an entrepreneurship? I don't know, but there is ownership of technology and body there at work that I think we can learn from. One concept that comes to mind that I think really embodies that nicely in a much more palatable way is the Hello World DIY kit that our Seattle team has developed. So this is a collection of carefully selected silicon elements like processors, connectivity elements, sensors that are made to attach to your clothes, and to create wearables or wearable concepts that are like super idiosyncratic, that on a very like contextual, in the moment basis allow you to do what you wanted to do. And it's that level of ownership and experimentation that I think the technology really needs, so we can understand what it's capable of doing, and also that we can use it to negotiate what we want it to do. What are the superpowers that we want it to give us? This is a really cute concept that has been done by one of our designers in Shanghai. His name is Simo. It's this really energetic Italian guy. When he came to Shanghai, he always has like a big smile on his face. Obviously on a bad day, everybody wears face masks because the air sucks. And he had no idea what people's facial expressions were. He just started tinkering and put a little light-dependent resistor inside the mask. And it turns out that it actually is good enough a proxy to detect what people, whether people are smiling or not. So he actually used that to drive this 8x8 LED matrix and built this cute little concept. I think we need a lot more of that to actually understand what wearables should do for us. I love that. And this is one of the mantras that I want to advocate for. We need to encourage tinkering and open innovation. Maybe not so or put sensors under our skin, but there is a level of experimentation that I think by now we're confident to enjoy on a mobile device that wearables have yet to accomplish. And this is something that I think as designers we should continue to tell our clients. They can't be straitjackets. They can't be like one-size-fit-all devices that tell us how we should live. They're, as you said earlier on, they're buzzing on our bodies, they're really attached to our skins, they're actually in our very, very private sphere. We should own what they do. We should own what they do for us in our life and whether or not they give us superpowers. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is how this notion of a one-size, like usually Silicon Valley prone solution doesn't really meet the requirements of many people in the rest of the planet. As I said already, I work in Shanghai, and what I found through some of my earliest wearable projects is that on this continuum where data turns into advice or meaning, there is a localization barrier somewhere there. People are not different that 42 degrees body temperature is dangerous and is a fever, but what people do with that or how they respond to that is really, really different, especially in Asia where a lot of the health habits and beliefs are informed by traditional Chinese medicine. So this mantra that sensing can be global but making sense must be local, something that not many manufacturers have fully internalized. This is also echoed really, really strongly in a global research study that we did. We were trying to understand how people value personal data across different countries. So we actually asked people in the US and China and India and the UK and in Germany to put a monetary value on items like their health history, their digital communication history, their government ID, credit card information, and so on. The differences were huge. It's not only that people in countries with lower income put less money on it. We actually cleaned the data for all of that. The priorities and the sensitivities around pieces of data are completely different across continents and sometimes countries. We've done this study twice over 3 years, and it was actually pretty shocking to see how people's literacy and awareness of personal data did not really change over the last 3 years, while our capability to hover up data and to turn that into whatever insights we need to get out of it has really evolved a lot. I think we're really about to lose track of customers completely and what they understand we're doing with the data that we're collecting. And again, this goes to show how locally specific this phenomenon is. So here's an example. This is a mask that has come out of our studio a couple of years back in a wearable competition. The research that we did indicated that people needed to, they had no control over the efficacy of their filter medium in the mask. So everybody was wearing it, but nobody knew where that actually worked. They just tried to put it on when they thought the air was shit. But it turns out that by putting a PM2.5 sensor into the mask, you can actually measure what exposure to dirty air the filter medium had, and you can advise people that now is a good time to change it. And you can also create really location-accurate network of data that people can share amongst themselves, which Chinese government doesn't like a lot, but they actually didn't shut it down yet. So another important difference is really the physicality of a wearable device, right? So these are a couple of concepts that have come out of some work that we did 2 years ago, again around personal health and wellness. And this was the time when some of the iconic wearable devices like FuelBand and Jawbone Up were really got a lot of hype. We used those devices and put them in front of some of the people in China, and it turned out that that design didn't work for them at all. It was way too loud, it was way too attention hungry, and it was not really respecting the fact that for many of them, health and managing your own wellness and well-being is a very private thing, and they didn't really want to be loud about the fact that they're doing this. So these designs, some of them I think are quite nice, are taking this wearable concept much more into a direction of jewelry or an accessory that isn't really loudly speaking about the fact that you're trying to manage your health and well-being. Another concept, this is not a concept, this actually has been launched recently, is this smartwatch that we created, which at first sight looks really normal, and as a designer you look at it and you think, well, I think I want to do something a lot cooler. But all the concepts that we put in front of customers, this really went, and what we found out was that that young demographic that we designed for was really keen to experiment with different types of identity. So on a daily basis, sometimes they would dress completely different. There would be a completely different public persona, and they needed a watch that allowed them to adapt to that really, really quickly. So it was important to them that the strap can be changed really easily, that the UI can be themed in different colors really easily, and that the design in itself doesn't really get in the way of what persona they were looking to project or or the person that they wanted to be. Another interesting insight, was that and that's something that we watched through, that was a behavioral insight, was that people were really reluctant to touch the screen on that watch. They wanted it to be clean, they wanted to look at it, but they said it would be good if there was another way to interact with the watch. So the team came up with this little capacitive strip that's on the side of the watch that enables interactions through these side swipes on the actual chassis or on the housing of the watch. It doesn't do away completely with on-screen interaction, but it's actually creating a nice little library of gestures that can help to operate that OS while keeping most of the time the screen unobscured. The last example that I wanted to show that is speaking to this, to the fact that I think wearables need to be really local and really specific with regards to where you use them, is this also 3-year-old concept that came out of our New York studio. This is, I think, a really awesome looking device that's only dedicated to navigating the New York Metro. That's all it does. And I think as component prices fall and our ability to build that stuff grows, I think really that's where it goes. I think wearables need to be a lot more situational, a lot less clunky and static. They need to be a lot more flexible in how we can negotiate with that technology what we want it to do on a cultural level, on a personal level, and that's something that makes me think this whole technology still has a long way to go. So one day, I think it might turn into the next personal computing paradigm, but up until now, there's a lot of imagination that's still missing. The last piece that I'm going to share is actually not a wearable concept in itself, but I think it's a good way to finish the presentation. So what I think is that instead of trying to shape behaviors that people have trouble keeping up, we actually often miss the opportunity to think about new behaviors that technology could change. So what we did in this project was to speak with kids and parents in China again. And one thing that we found was that parents felt really bad about the fact that their kids have to play inside because environmental safety issues are really bad. And one-child policy furthermore leads to a situation where a lot of kids play alone. And parents find themselves in this weird spot where they kind of like the fact that kids play with tablets and mobile phones, because surely it's going to equip them for the future and it's going to increase computer literacy. But they're also worried that they're getting really lazy and that all that comes at the expense of physical activity. So we wanted to find a way to change that and to see how can we create a portfolio of online games that actually encourage physical activity, that build literacy not only for technology but also for environmental safety issues, and that help kids understand what responsibility actually means. So in this example, you see a little character that we had a lot of fun developing, who's swimming on this patch of ice. And the cool thing about this game is that it's really connected to environmental data. So if it's sunny outside, it will be sunny in the game. If the wind blows south, this patch of ice will go south and will melt. If the air is shit, the air will be shit in the game. But what we also did is we developed a set of these really innocent-looking wooden sensors that represent some of the core elements of our environment. So this is a temperature sensor. And what we could do with that is we can actually encourage the kid to connect their apartment and make decisions that they're making in their own environment impact the character that they play with on the screen. And this is a nice way to, I think, not only encourage physical activity, but also to build a sense of responsibility and help people understand that decisions that they're making in the here and now impact people or other characters far away. This is a little movie that's still in the making. It's the son of one of our one of our creative directors in the movie here. So it's just putting this temperature sensor into the fridge because it's got really hot in the game, and this all responds immediately. And we're hoping to mature this a little bit more so that this can turn into a platform where other game developers can actually develop for those sensors. So this is not like a one-off set of games. It should be more like a way to play. That's where we want to take it. This has been developed under the umbrella of Frog Labs, which is our own internal concept development platform. It was really a lot of fun doing this. So I thought this would be a good way to finish my presentation. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we've got time for maybe for a couple of questions. If you've got a question, pop your hand up, we'll run a mic to you. If I can make them work.
Confusing.
Yay! Cool. We've got questions to Rena. Got time for maybe one or two.
I'll shoot a question. Is that active?
No, but the people at the back can't hear you.
Alright,
Done this
that was
before.
really great. I was just curious, when you were talking about things being situational and discrete and sort of like the New York subway idea and that kind of idea, what other ideas are out there at the moment that you guys are exploring in that space?
I wouldn't say that there's a specific idea that that we're currently working on, but I think one thing where wearables often break down, because what we're seeing is that people stop using them after a while. It's because they actually don't really scale to how our health situation changes. A lot of the manufacturers, they have a license to build a step, or a wellness-themed device, but as soon as you really get sick, they can't really help you anymore because they don't have a license or the brand for it. But I think this notion of contact and responding to the situation could lead to a wearable where maybe, let's say, a doctor prescribes a sensor for you that you wear for a while on maybe a device that is much more a platform than we see today. You could return it once you're done and you're healthy again. So I think what they do for us as a piece of technology that we allow so close to our body, it needs to evolve the way that our well-being and our health evolves. So, and I think it's probably easiest to do that with a battery or a collection of sensors that you can actually pick based on what you're going to do tonight or how you feel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Raina. Very much.
Thank you for having us. There's a few of us on the ground. Some of the frogs are here with us. So thanks for having us. And it's very nice to be here in Sydney.
Put up your hands, frogs, so people can come talk to you. There you go. Over there.
Thank you.
Thanks.